took a long time for stories like this one to become eventually public and show that Switzerland did not only turn back Jewish refugees at the border and handed them over to the Nazis, which meant their death sentence. A great deal of humanity in quietly rescuing refugees, among them a large number of Jewish children, under extreme, oft life-threatening conditions, is the bottom line of this amazing story my wife Monique and I were unexpectedly confronted with during our holiday in Switzerland in 2015.
6 years ago, Monique and Jacques Korolnik went on a discovery trip to Switzerland, to the Vallée de Joux. It's situated in the French part of Switzerland, about half an hour's drive from the city of Lausanne, close to the French border. The couple arrived in Switzerland one summer's evening in July, just as the sun was setting. It was a small village next to a lake called Le Pont. It was so beautiful there that they decided somewhat spontaneously to stay overnight and booked a room at the Hôtel de la Throught, the Hotel of the Throught. Having unpacked and freshened up, they went down to have a drink at the hotel's restaurant. Jacques continues the story. There were paper placemats on the table. We looked at them, and what we saw made us look twice. There were several pictures on the mats, and one especially drew our attention. It was a German J, short for the word Jude. It was the J that the German government stamped on their Jewish citizens' passports to readily identify them as Jews. I thought, what is this photo doing here on a table mat, in a restaurant, in the middle of Switzerland, in the middle of nowhere? The couple examined the other pictures more closely and read the text on the larger one. It read like this: Welcome, in commemoration of the schleppers of the Risoux. During the Second World War, a handful of brave, selfless local citizens smuggled many people with documents through the Risoux forest. Their acts of bravery are part of the history of our region. Out of modesty or fear of negative reactions, these heroes have often remained quiet and in the shadows. The Korolniks realized they'd stumbled by chance upon a little-known piece of history, that these table mats were produced telling the story of an area during the Second World War, the true tale of the courageous women and men who risked their own lives and those of their family to collect Jews and other people in danger across the border in German-occupied France. Acting as guides, they had smuggled men, women and children to the safety of neutral Switzerland. Monique takes up the story. We inquired at the hotel about this totally unknown and unbelievable story. They gave us a leaflet with more details and showed us the small exhibition that was on permanent display in one of the hotel's dining rooms. There were all sorts of things there, including the original climbing tools, people's personal possessions, warm clothing, etc., and skis. Why skis? Because we were told many of the rescue operations took place during the winter, when the Valais area is covered in snow and is one of the coldest regions in Switzerland, with temperatures going as low as -30 degrees. The hotel also told the Korolniks that there was a small monument opposite the hotel on the promenade by the lake, which was erected just 7 years ago in 2014. The monument itself takes the form of a hollow hexagonal column. The same message is translated into 6 languages, one on each side of the column, in French, German, Italian, English, Japanese, and Hebrew. It says, "To the men and women of the Risoux forests who risked their lives to aid the escape of those in the resistance, intelligence officers and Jews threatened with death in occupied France during the Second World War, 1944 to 2014. With gratitude, La Vallée de Joux." The facts were there, but they seemed to be the bare bones of the story. They could see the tip of the iceberg, but nothing below it. Jacques and Monique then started researching the detail of what happened during those terrible days of the Second World War. According to the guidebooks, the Grand Risoux forest, situated in the Vallée de Joux, remains one of the largest continuous expanses of woodland in Europe, with over 2,200 hectares of natural woodland. The Risoux presented a perfect natural border between German-occupied France and the freedom of neutral Switzerland. It offered an advantageous starting point for those wishing to flee from German tyranny, with only a small 3-foot-high dry stone wall separating the two countries. It enabled Jews, Allied service personnel and resistance fighters to enter Switzerland. That is, of course, if they could find a way to get there. In 1940, 50 local people from the Vallée de Joux joined the Swiss Information Service as part of the Swiss Intelligence Services to set up a small group of passeurs, also known as smugglers, to organize, supervise and guide the safe passage along the 200-kilometer, that's about 125 miles, of difficult forest trails. And it was not only human beings fleeing persecution who were transported across the border. Confidential documents and microfilms regarding the German army movements were also smuggled across and sent to the British intelligence services at the embassy in Lausanne. To make it more difficult for the Germans to track the smugglers, numerous different routes were formed throughout the forest, many of which can still be traced today. The Germans patrolled the French side throughout the day and throughout the night. If anyone was found within 2 kilometers of the border, they were shot on sight with no discussion. Of course, smuggling people, top-secret documents and arms supplies was a highly risky business. Many smugglers were shot by the Germans. The unlucky ones were captured alive and sent to concentration camps like Dachau for further questioning and almost certain torture and death. Local residents Anne-Marie Imhoff-Piget, who headed the smuggling group together with Victoria Cordier, worked to transport Jewish orphans from a children's refugee centre close to Toulouse in France through the Risoux to the safety of Switzerland. The Jewish children rescued through the forest were mostly orphans or children whose parents were missing, presumed killed, from Germany, Austria, Belgium and France. The Children's Department of the Swiss Red Cross agreed that the Jewish children could stay at their refugee centre, the Château de la Hille, near Parmier in Ariège. They provided them with food, shelter, clothing and other essentials. After a long and dangerous journey, the children brought just what they wore on their backs and the little they could carry. During the war, Anne-Marie joined the Red Cross. She worked in Ariège, in a centre which took in young orphans, mostly Jews. Seeing the mortal danger they were in, Anne-Marie tried to save them together with most of the staff at the centre. Despite reprimands from her official superiors in Switzerland, she continued to help save Jewish children in France and became a border crosser, playing hide-and-seek with the German patrols. Anne-Marie was lucky. She was the daughter of a forest inspector from the Vallée de Joux. This ancestry gave her a thorough knowledge of the Risoux, through which, with a few accomplices, she set up a network of people willing to help, and escape routes between occupied France and Switzerland were formed between 1942 and 1944. The journey started at the famous Château de la Hille near Toulouse in France, 700 kilometers away from the Risoux. It was a long journey. Once over the border, the guided group would rest and recover from a long, difficult journey at 1 or 2 wooden huts hidden deep in the forest. They had ironic names. Le Refuge des Sages, the Safe House of the Wise, was one, and l'Hôtel d'Italie, the Hotel of Italy. The smugglers would return to their homes before dawn if their missions went well. The escapees were rescued and safe in Switzerland. They had to continue another 10 kilometers from the border, where they could register their names and remain in internment camps for illegal foreigners, but within the safety of Switzerland. Anne-Marie, the nurse and the head of Operation Risoux, succeeded, together with her network of smugglers, to save many lives, and mainly the lives of Jewish children. After the war, and despite their selfless bravery, more than 100 Swiss wartime smugglers were accused, fined or imprisoned by the Swiss authorities for charging money and profiteering from smuggling contraband during the war. The smugglers had of course admitted to carrying contraband, such as chocolates and cigarettes, when stopped by the German army to keep them off the trail of their real cargo. The Germans gave the smugglers fines and therefore not a death sentence. But it took until 2009 to put the record straight. Many of those who were involved in the smuggling network were then decorated as heroes of the Second World War. Here are just 4 of them. Anne-Marie Imhoff-Pigeouet, the organizing brain of the rescue team who helped mainly Jewish children cross the French-Swiss border, thus saving them from certain death. She was awarded the Medal of the Righteous from Yad Vashem in Jerusalem in 1992. Fred Raymond was a watchmaker and a spy, and a great sportsman too. His mission was to observe the occupied French departments on the other side of the Risoux, and he was leader of the Swiss Connection. Madeleine Cordier was a deeply religious woman who followed her whole family into working with the resistance. She specialized in making forged passports, and together with her younger sister, she managed to help many people escape. Finally, Victoria Cordier. She was the youngest sister of the Cordiers, a resolute and intrepid young woman who was induced into the resistance in Lyon with the responsibility of liaising with the Swiss Connection. And so, thanks to a spontaneous stay in a Swiss hotel by Monique and Jacques Korolnik, we now know another chapter of how good people at huge personal risk helped Jews during those dark days of the Shoah. We end this story with a message in 6 languages taken from the official commemorative video of the heroic events in the forest of Risoux.